Hello, I'm John Michael Chambers, and welcome back to Intel and Insights with 107, now published every week on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. I also publish a monthly 1 hour program. I'd like you to check out the 40,000 foot view. Please visit and bookmark johnmichaelchambers.com and join me and follow me on my Rumble channel now to view all these episodes. Also, be sure to visit thejennifermack.com yourself to an arsenal for the mega movement uh, with the seal of approval and stamp and signature of 107. Now, Juan has been serving this nation since the time of Ronald Reagan. He's a very well connected individual, and I'll leave it at that. His clandestine assignments and self imposed directives, many of which are unknown to you and I, play a critical role in protecting this nation and its interest for decades. A good friend and most valuable voice and resource, lending his time, which is all we have, and it's precious for the new media and for you today. Thank you, Juan, for joining us again.
Hey, beautiful to talk with your audience, John.
There are 20 points that I've found and isolated and written up here to go over with you. But what I'm going to do first, for the benefit of our audience, is read this to you. It comes from Wikipedia, so some of it take with a grain of salt, some of it is noteworthy. Here we go. And then we're going to have Juan give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down on a series of points that are talking points all over social media and other influences discussing the miracle of NESARA GESARA. Let's delve into and see how much of
let
this.
me do one thing, John, and
Sure.
we didn't talk about this beforehand, but let me just clarify something for people. We're in a global battle where the battle fronts are not what classically we would think of as battle fronts. It's not man to man with swords, knives, guns, tanks, battleships, even space platforms, etc. The lines of war have been used before in the monetary realm, bacteriological. Remember, there was people putting, smallpox into blankets and distributing with certain groups. We've had the biological at times throughout history. China itself, on numerous occasions, several occasions over the last couple thousand years, there was attacks where up to 90% of the existing population was exterminated to protect one bloodline or another or group as the ones that would survive on into the time. Within what you're describing, you're only talking about a particular type of front having to do with monetary systems and the ability, especially here in the West, to do business. See, America's more vulnerable because the business of America, as Reagan said, is business. You wipe out the ability of people to do contract law, monetary exchanges, and do it smoothly and quickly and efficiently. You choke down our ability to breathe the oxygen of business, which makes America work. And as you do that, as you throttle it back, we can do less work. We can operate under some chokehold, but only for so long, and then you pass out. And that's what these monsters are wanting. And within this same conversation, the people trying to take over America, who have been plotting this for decades and decades and decades and decades, intended to create a falsehood of what looked like the salvation for business in the West and business in America by clearing the books. And I've said this all the way back before Trump announced, long before Trump announced that he was even going to be a candidate. Trump is here to preside over the bankruptcy of America. But in a positive sense, in a good bankruptcy court, where the judge is trying to bring justice correctly to the situation, the true creditors, the ones that brought real value assets into the business or to the personal situation, they're the ones that the judge, the court, must protect, who have real assets thrown in, not the fake receipts or the false promises of payment and expectation. So that those that truly had skin in the game are the ones that come out with something as the primary creditors, the real ones that had real value that they brought in, who then were losing real assets they brought in. And what is being done here is that certain players came in and did a legal construct, multiple of them, and have baited people into believing that if they go along with these legal constructs out across the world, they're going to get some fantastical, unbelievable gain at the expense of everybody else because they were smart enough to get there first. The reality is that was gamed out in the intelligence community with the intent that as they got their players into office, they were going to move the money into their hands under the rouge, the illusion that this was just the way it was, and smart people adopted these things early, and they are going to be the beneficiaries because they were forward thinking, not realizing that they themselves were being sucked into a Ponzi scheme, a Ponzi scam that was to create the illusion of fairness because they adopted these ideas early and put investment in, but really they were participating unknowingly in a carnival of illusions so that the other bad guys could actually come in and take it all. And with a couple little players here and there salted into the audience would get a little bit and be all excited about theirs, while in reality, the world, the Western world, was stolen away from us to these globalista players under a ruse of fairness in the way these games are played with Qatar, NESARA, etc. Not that that won't be in play, but it won't be the way they wanted it. We're going to war, and we're not letting them rob the bank and steal it and keep it at the expense of the true Americans and others around the world who have real skin in the game, who are the true owners of this world and the property thereof, and the business, the transactions, and the future.
Well, that's a valuable and insightful perspective to set this up for where I'm going to take us now, Juan. Thank you for that. And I took a note. Business of America is business. That's very true. And here we are. NESARA GESARA. Folks, I'm going to read to you straight from Wikipedia, and I'll go through it rather quickly because there's about 20 points identified that I'd want to weigh in on, and perhaps he's supportive of some of them, perhaps not others. So we're going to get a thumbs up, a quick thumbs up, and a quick thumbs down, and a brief comment from Juan on perhaps 10 of those points in part 1 episode of NESARA GESARA. So here we go. We'll get it definitively on the record. Let's see. Here we have it. Wikipedia, the National Economic Security and Recovery Act, NESARA, is a set of proposed economic reforms for the United States during the 1990s by private citizen Harvey Francis Barnard. Barnard claimed that the proposals, which included replacing the income tax with a national sales tax, abolishing compound interest on secured loans, and returning to a bimetallic currency, which we'll get another time, would result in 0% inflation and more stable economy. The proposals were never introduced before Congress. Wikipedia goes on as I conclude this paragraph. Since the early 2000s, NESARA has become better known as the subject of a cult-like conspiracy theory whose original promoter was internet personality, I'll get the name wrong, Shani Candace Goodwin, better known as Dove of Oneness. Goodwin, who appropriated the NESARA notions without Barnard's consent, claimed that the act was actually passed with additional provisions as the National Economic Security and Reform Act, or NESARA, and then suppressed by then President George W. Bush administration and the Supreme Court. Goodwin's conspiracy emails were translated into several languages and had a large following online. As we wrap this up, it says here adherents to the theory have also been using the name GESARA or GESARA, standing for Global Economic Security and Recovery Act, GESARA, or Global Economic Security and Reformation Act, in order to extend the proposed NESARA, thus NESARA GESARA. So there you have it, Wikipedia. Perhaps some accurate, some not accurate. After all, it is Wikipedia, but I've done the best I can, and so has Juan in his introduction to set the tone. So, quick, quick comments on each bullet as I
And
go
by the
through
way,
it
let
in
me just
part
say this,
one.
John.
Sure.
That's not a bad history lesson there. And I think
Okay.
that in this particular case, the Wikipedia background, the people that put that into Wikipedia there, that's actually a pretty good rendition of how we got to where we're at. So I'm not at odds with that in any of those details there at this point. Go ahead.
Well, good. Thanks for chiming in on that. That's important. That should have been my first question. You're already there. All right. So here are some of the bullets, some of the narratives that are going out there concerning NESARA GESARA. Uh, Number one, so a thumbs up or a thumbs down and comments from Juan as we play this game. Number one, zeroes out all credit card, mortgage, and other bank debt due to the illegal banking and government activities. This is the Federal Reserve's worst nightmare. Thumbs up or thumbs down on that notion?
Well, it's a little hard to be definitive, but in the basic, there you go. The reality is, if you void all contract law, it sounds great when you're talking the banking and the mortgages and everything else. But what about like I bought my first farm under contract with the guy that was the owner of the farm, no bank involved, and we had a 10-year note. Well, if you're going to avoid all of that, what you can take out to private parties, but then again, what a bank, what are they doing? They're getting in the most rudimentary sense money from stockholders that they're loaning out to people doing similar property transactions, etc. So it sounds great to say it's the Federal Reserve and other things, but the reality is you're wiping out a lot of people who have invested one way or another into those bank stocks, and then they get wiped out because their intermediary is the bank at some basic level, and you can get all into the intricacies, and I know that you get lost in the weeds. Who's the bank really, and where's the money really, and how did the Federal Reserve create it and all that. But at some level, at the point where you destroy the ability to have contract law honored within the courts and normal business, then essentially you have an extreme version of communism. Nobody owns anything. Everybody owns everything. It's a free for all. Who's squatting in which location? You've just done a wipeout that serves this globalista, and the idea that everybody's going to be happy and nobody's going to own a thing. Yeah, that's going to work great. Okay, it's going to be who has the biggest gun and the largest game.
Good point. Okay, thumbs down. Maybe, perhaps we're not going to be experiencing a complete and full forgiveness of debt across the boards. Second one I'd like to go over is the abolishment of the income tax code. Now, it's my understanding, of course, that the income tax code, like the Federal Reserve, is legal, but unconstitutional, and remains so to this day. Correct me if I'm wrong, Juan, but do you see, as part of NESARA GESARA, the abolishment of the income tax?
Well, the reality is the tax code as it currently exists and the I.R.S. itself. I.R.S. is a private corporation, just like the Federal Reserve. It's domiciled in Puerto Rico, was originally domiciled over in the Philippines, and then switched to Puerto Rico when the Philippines became independent. So you have a fraud upon the American people. You had some politicians that bought into the fraud back in 1913 and doubled down on it, and were left with the legacy there. The Constitution doesn't support it. A lot of what's going to happen in America after the conflicts ahead and the reset of America in a militarized venue is going to be the abolishment of the IRS. It's actually not even you know none of those laws actually are correct there. My friend Erwin Schiff was probably the best at explaining that to the people, to the world. And so it's going to be a painful thing. There's a lot going on there. The short version is, I agree. IRS is gone when it's all over, but it's a long road. It's a hard road to get there. I would not advise people to decide not to pay your taxes at this time. But there's some great people out there making some of those arguments and discussions. And, certainly some of those interviews would be very worthwhile that explain that to people. And I do your study, do your research. It's a personal decision how you're going to act there. And I avoid the gurus somewhat unless I really, really understood what I was doing.
Perfect. Well, thank you. A thumbs up on the long road to the abolishment of the income tax. I agree with you on pay your taxes, have yourself legally properly structured. Now, all right, next one, abolish the IRS. Sort of touched on that a moment ago, but abolish the IRS, and NESARA GESARA will do this. Employees of the IRS will be transferred into the US Treasury national sales tax area. I've heard a bit about this a while back, and I'm quite frankly a little confused about it. What's your take on the NESARA abolishment of the IRS and the employees being transferred into the Treasury national sales tax area?
Well, the reality is if we're doing things correctly, the way the Constitution was set up, we don't need anywhere near the number of employees that we've had. There is going to be a culling of all federal employees that is going to relieve a huge burden on American people. And there's assets that will be converted to cash and opened up to the American people to purchase as we scale back the federal government, go back to states' rights. And so some of those pressures that we see in the current environment, the way we do the equation, diminish radically out into the future. And the need even for a national sales tax may not be as strong as people are envisioning at this time. If these people wanting that were to prevail, they'd have a global sales tax also. And we're not going along with that, and a green tax and everything else. We're going a different direction, but there's a lot of water's got to go under the bridge before we get there. And what people can see or understand today, and what they'll see or understand or be willing to go along with in the next 2 to 5 years, is going to be radically different. So much so that it's hard to even envision today what it will look like 3 to 5 years from now, and make those evaluations, equations make sense. We're going to have to see the world as it reemerges on the far side of some of these current crises, as we take out the fraudulent politicians who've been put there through vote and election fraud, who do not represent the American people. And then we'll do a reevaluation what we want to go to the federal government and how we get it there, and what we want to go to states and local government and how we get there also. The world will be radically, unimaginably different in the future, 2, 3, 5 years from now. So much so that let's not worry about making those decisions for the moment.
All
We don't have enough
right, Juan,
information.
thank you. And this next,
Yeah,
the
we don't
next
have enough
question,
information right now. I'm sorry, is what I guess we're trying to say, to even make a informed assessment of what we're going to need or how we're going to want to conduct business in the taxing arena on the far side of these crises, if you get right down to it. But go ahead.
That makes a lot of sense. So this is sort of delving into the related subject point on the NESARA promise list. Create a 14% flat rate for the government. In other words, food and medicine will not be taxed, nor will used items such as, say, a secondhand home or a car or something of that nature. Any thumbs up, thumbs down, quick comments on that aspect?
Again, you're not understanding what the world's going to look like. The crises that we're about to go through are so of such magnitude that you're trying to understand a five-dimensional world in a two-dimensional perspective that you live in right now. You don't really grasp what the world's going to look like on the far side of these crises. And I think you have to take a deep breath, and some things will be easier to understand once we've gone through what we're about to go through.
That makes sense. And as I'm listening to your comments on this one, I think we're going to get through this pretty quickly, this list, because I think that's going to be the answer for the next couple of questions. But that's okay, because I want to delve into a related subject as we close out. But let's finish off some of these talking points on the NESARA. How about increases benefits to senior citizens? In other words, senior citizens are going to receive an increase in benefits. It seems quite the opposite today, but that's on the NESARA wish list according to the sentiments that are out there. What's your take on that?
In the reset that's coming, the true reset, the bankruptcy, a lot of assets that were stolen are going to be returned into the Treasury's control. There's going to be a lot of assets seized from the criminal activities of those people that we're going after. And those assets will be converted to repay the Social Security recipients who had a vast wealth stolen from them. At the end of the day, it won't be perfect. Not everybody's going to be completely happy with how it's done. But in the bankruptcy, everybody generally isn't happy because there is loss that's going to be suffered over real expectations or inflated expectations. And what actually happens, there's stolen time that can never be replaced, an opportunity. It's going to be kind of a split the baby types of decisions, the best that we can come up with under the circumstances. And you start over, start afresh. It's a new day for America. It will be better than what was going to happen, what was coming for us. It won't be everything that people will, be satisfied with. It will be better though, and it's the best that we can do in the circumstances. People take a deep breath. A lot of frauds have been committed on the American people and on the world, and it costs a lot of lives. I know where people's minds go instantly, but I'll use this example. Look at all of the death and destruction occurring in Ukraine. The death there, something between 600 and a million lives, 600,000, a million lives potentially. I think those are highly inflated numbers, but that's what some people talk about. I think the numbers are radically less than that. But the damage to lives is in the millions. And with that in mind, how many of those are coming back with any kind of a settlement? How much of the productivity of the people who have lost their lives, lost their place of living, that have been scattered across Europe and the world, how are they going to recover in their lifetime and refine some ability to give into the world their productive capacity, their genius, their labors, their children? We have had a cost that is unfathomable. Only God himself could ever put a value to it ultimately. We suffer because of these losses out into the future. It's like all the aborted babies. What would they have added productivity, genius, invention to the world if they had not been aborted? Only God himself knows. But at the point that we stop the bleeding, we stop the insanity, we begin the process of building and rebuilding again, and take up the yoke and set the plow straight and begin the process of rebuilding America, rebuilding the world, and creating a future for our children, our children's children, for generations to come. That is something to look forward to, something to anticipate with fervor and expectation, a beauty that can only come from life. And right now we're in a death spiral. We're going to pull out of it, God willing, and go on to a bright future. But there's a lot of pain in the meantime to get to that point.
Yeah, you mentioned, just to recap it, we've got 7 minutes to go, is where are we here? Took some notes. Yeah, you talk about the assets that have been stolen from the American people, from all of us, over quite a period of time. It reminds me of Lynn Wood, sort of disappeared from the front line of these days, but he was quite the speaker at the very first Clay Clark Reawaken tour, which I was a participant in. And that's where he made the big statement of the airplanes, plural, that have already begun the evacuation and the return of a lot of the stolen goods stored at the Vatican. We can save that for another show. But that process, folks, has already been underway. And clearly, as Juan just stated, a lot more to come, used to shore up perhaps Social Security and then spread the benefit out here and there as deemed so at the time. The other thing I want to mention that you mentioned in the very beginning, Juan, was the fact, and this is very important, folks, the fact that President Trump, in part, if not fully, but in part, was chosen and then accepted the mission back in the day that led him to running for office to preside over the American bankruptcy and return America back to what it was. That reminds me of Jan Halper Hayes, out on the path now, serving on a task force of the Department of Defense, PhD, reiterating the 1871 US Corp going into debt to the Bank of England, and that ended America as we knew it. This is what's being restored. Well, we can jump into that in great detail at another show. Return. All right, a couple of more bullets as we wrap up. Of the NESARA promises, returns constitutional law to all courts and legal matters. You touched on that in the beginning. If you wouldn't mind touching on that again.
Well, again, if you get right down to it, America has been hijacked by a cult of globalists, not just from one country, but from all around the world, colluding together to take us a place that wasn't the will of the American people, to put people into positions of leadership, primarily through vote fraud and through the militarization of psychological assets, corporate assets, through DARPA itself, to steal the business of America to a select group, the business of the world to a select group of families, and take control of the West, to wipe out family business ownership, individual business entrepreneurship, and to turn it over to this select group in a militarized takeover of the business of America. That will be addressed. It will be part of the reset, if you want to say it, to return some of that productivity, that business acumen back to the American shareholders, their labor, their benefit, for themselves and their families. It won't be instant. It will take some time, but literally the asset of the American dream even will be returned to the American people. The American dream is as much an asset of America as any tangible oil or mining commodity stuck in the earth. Without the imagination, the business sense, the productive genius to industrialize an idea makes the American people so different in this world. Without that, we aren't America. It's our innovative genius and our ability to work together and to bring people from all over the world to create, build, develop these tools of commerce to make our lives better, different, healthier, more full. And that's what's going to be returned to the American people. That stolen dream that is what America really is going to be returned to the American people. And that's what's going to be the most beautiful part of what's coming.
I want to thank our audience for joining us. I'm John Michael Chambers, Intel and Insights with 107, now published weekly every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And join me for my 1-hour monthly program titled The 40,000 Foot View, first Friday of each month, 6 p.m. Eastern. Please visit and bookmark my website, johnmichaelchambers.com, and follow me on my new Rumble channel to view these and other episodes. Also, be sure to visit thejennifermack.com to avail yourself to an arsenal, an increasing arsenal of films, books, and swag for the MAGA movement. From yours truly, 107. I want to thank you all for being here. Where we go one, we go all. Stay safe, and God bless you.